And then I'll see if I can get, if it'll allow me to do both. Cease. It's asking for your username and password again. Password, you get an idea. Oh, shit.
Okay.
Yeah.
Mine says it's on YouTube now.
Yeah, it's like coming up live. I did, this is a while ago. Here, I need to give you this. Yeah, we got to find out if it's going to another meeting. Sometimes when it's setting up on these YouTubes, it's actually not going. It's not allowing us to put this meeting on YouTube. What it's doing is putting one of the old meetings on YouTube. Yeah, I got it recorded. Okay, so, all right. What we're going to do is recording the meeting. We're going to share the recording with everybody because otherwise all they're going to watch is one of our older meetings. I don't know why YouTube is doing that unless it has a space requirement or we don't even know. Technical glitch. All right, Jerry, go.
All right. All right. Well, good morning, everybody. It's good to see you all once again. Now, we have done the lion's share of the work in terms of crafting the strategic plan over the last 6 weeks. Our agenda this morning is to fine-tune the plan. So we want to review each of the 6 strategic areas and then add some greater detail, specifically, what is the expected time frame for implementation, and identify who would be the responsible parties. And that might be an individual like the GM, or it could be the entire board of directors, or it could be a already established committee or a new ad hoc committee. But we want to focus on when and who as 2 key aspects to filling out the strategic plan. And then as time allows, we want to look at the vision and mission statements and make sure that we have a vision and mission statement that is aligned with the strategic plan. So that's the agenda for this morning, and we'll go as far as time allows. Anybody have any questions before we get started? All right, so why don't we go and look at the strategic area of landscape improvements. And under landscape improvements, this was one of the more extensive of the list of action items. We have 3 pages of action items, actually 4 pages of action items associated with landscape improvements. So we'll begin with 1.1. Establishing a long-term plan for the common areas. When would that be done, and who would be the parties responsible? So for establishing a long-term 3 to 10-year plan for common area landscape coverings from conceptualization through installation and maturation. Be responsible. Would that just be the landscaping committee?
Are we on 1.1?
Yes.
1.1A?
No,
Or
1.1.
I'm
I would-
sorry, Jerry. What,
Yeah,
what,
1.1 overall, 1.1A and B will follow from it. But in terms of that whole area, is that going to be the landscaping committee overall?
Well, it'll be,
No,
they'll propose something to the board, but the board will have to approve it.
Right, but the party that's responsible for generating that report will be the landscaping committee?
I would think the landscaping and committee with, in conjunction with the landscaper and Mark. I mean, I
Okay,
don't
so,
think the landscaping committee can come up with a 3 to 10 year plan without input from Brightview of what's reasonable.
okay. So for 1.1, and it's true that the plan, the metric to measure accomplishment is completed plan adopted by the board. So the board oversees it and has to approve it, but the creation of the plan would be by the landscaping committee, Brightview, and the GM. Does that sound appropriate?
sounds good.
And when would, we know that 1.1 is made up of 3 subparts, 1.1A, 1.1B, and 1.1C. But in terms of the overall completed plan, is that something that's going to be done within the next year, within the next 2 years, or further down the road? So would this 1.1 be accomplished by this time next year?
That would certainly be ideal so that we have something to be looking forward to.
Okay,
Well, I think we need to hear from Linda.
Well, I think you have to base this on, is the budget going to be the same the next 10 years? If you're doing a 3 to 10 year plan, it makes a big difference of what your budget is yearly.
Well, I think you should tell us what the budget should be as part of developing the plan. I wouldn't limit it on current budget.
Yeah, I would agree.
Okay.
Terry, you're waiting.
Yes. In order to determine a budget, I think you need to have some engineering expertise to identify plantings in the common area, the length of time that would be there, how long they're going to last, what is the replacement cost for each particular type of planting. And by doing that, you'll be able to determine what you can do over the course of 3 to 10 years and select different stages, how much you're going to do each year. And because of the amount of engineering put into it, get a finalized cost as to what it's going to be, and then stratify it over the course of the time as to how much you can absorb each year within a responsible budget.
I think that's a great idea. If you look at 1.B and 1.C, that'll be up to the landscaping committee to generate that kind of detail in their report, utilizing some of the expertise from outside experts that look at the lifespan of plantings and costs and a time frame for accomplishing everything. So those are essential ingredients that the board is going to need before approving. But that'll be the detail that the landscape committee will be generating, utilizing 1.B and 1.C as part of the process.
I'm wondering, in as much as this was like the top rated area throughout the community, 83% approval rating, I wonder if we should make some statement here that the board should reflect that in its budget.
So like a 1.1D saying that enhancements to landscaping will be a component of budgetary considerations.
Yeah, maybe something even stronger than that, that reflects this plan and reflects the community's interest in this particular area. Because it seems that we've talked about this for several years, about increasing the amount of money in landscaping, and we've barely done that. So I think we need to send a message to ourselves that let's deal with this appropriately through the budget.
Well,
Yes, Lanny.
let's add it to 1.1, where we're talking about the long-term plan for improving common area landscaping, and including significant increased budgeting or something like that. I'm not sure what wording you want, but it seems like that's right where it belongs, right at the beginning.
That's a good point. So we'll put the enhancements to the budget, some wording, right part to what is the main action item of 1.1. Good. Terry?
I'm wondering if we should refer to the final report. I mean, if this is a long-term plan, let's say 2 years from now, we have a shift in the board composition, and it just seems to me that we should reflect that in there so even new boards can understand the importance.
Okay, so in 1.1, I'll also put phrasing recognizing the value and desire of the community residents for enhancements to landscaping.
As top rated,
Okay,
And to support that concept financially.
yes.
go ahead. We'll go to Terry and then to you, Lanny.
Yeah, I think that my only issue with this is that my feeling is that we need to maintain the growth of our plantings to the extent that they are within a normal lifespan. And let's not get overboard into enhancing further rather than making sure that the beautiful flora and fauna that we have maintains itself. So, you know, I'm a little bit torn with whether we're addressing new plantings to replace old plantings, or if we have intentions of going further and enhancing plantings. I'm concerned about that.
Well, I think that's a good point, but I think that is up to the judgment of the landscaping committee to come up with a plan that covers those type of issues. We're going to be talking about when a mature planting like a shrub needs replacing, and as well as additions that would be further enhancement. So I think both aspects are going to be embodied in the plan. The landscaping committee through Brightview and working with the general. Lanny?
Getting to your point, Paul, about future boards, the advantage of us, say next March, before the new elections, approving a 10-year plan will make it such that future boards will have to actively vote against that plan if they want to make a change, and then inertia may make it less likely that it would get derailed if if we have this deadline of March of next year so that we can pass that plan.
Good. So we'll say March of 2021 as the deadline for a plan to be presented to the board for approval. All right, 1.2, a document that provides guidance to residents and condo associations for maintaining the landscaping on their property. Who would be creating that? Would that also be the landscaping committee? So I'm looking at 1.2 on the document.
1.2.
That may come from the landscape. The problem is that it's tough to have a consistency of service across the condominium areas as it's combined with the single family homes, because they're sort of vastly different between someone's private property and the common areas that are shared by the condominium owners.
So
It
it's
may
saying
have to
create
have-
document, it should say create documents.
Yeah, probably two, maybe even three, one for common grounds, one for single family homes, and one for the condo and coach home areas. I mean, they'd all have the same basic tenants, I would imagine, but maybe they are at least giving those individual areas their own sense of, what they're responsible for.
Is that a document that we can ask Brightview to create?
I don't know. I guess so. I'm not. I think it would be a fairly simple, in an odd way,
Right, I'm not sure that, I think it's going to be like a general outline,
Right, bullet points.
bullet points, because we're treading on condo associations and
Well, it's guidance.
it's guidance, period. Not necessarily guidelines, but some guidance and suggestions, recommendations, that sort of thing that they can work with their landscaper on.
Okay. Very good. Is that something that we can do within the next year?
I think so.
Now, as part of that, we also want to create some standards for lawn maintenance. That's 1.2A. Would that be from the landscape committee or from Brightview? Lanny?
Well, what we have there now is ARC, but our terminology is Architectural Standards Committee, ASC.
Right now, my understanding was ARC doesn't feel that they can really.
We don't have, no, my point is
without-
we don't have an ARC.
Oh,
We have
It's
ASC.
called ASC, not ARC.
ASC. Okay.
Same thing.
But right now, they don't feel like they have any standards from which they can evaluate the quality of lawns, right?
Right.
And the question is, Michael, do you feel like you can develop that?
Not independently.
From,
I think we would have to work with the landscape committee to do that.
But ultimately, we could end up with standards.
Correct. Yes.
So the ASC will work with Brightview to establish those standards.
I think it has to be with the architect or with the landscaping committee.
Okay. And developing some standards can be done within the next year, correct?
Correct.
Okay.
Is there any rule about unoccupied properties must not shut off irrigation water, unoccupied properties.
There's a rule that no one's allowed to alter irrigation.
Okay, but often when I go to a property where the owner isn't there, perhaps the property's for sale for rent, I know the water's shut off. I can tell by the lawn. I go look, it's off.
And that's a direct violation of
I know.
our rules.
But I do think that individual homeowners who live there year round probably do make adjustments for their water. I just think that's a fact. So should it be a rule that unoccupied properties are not to shut off irrigation water?
I think it's a rule already.
Not really.
So,
It's not-
Linda, when we get down to 1.11,
Okay,
that item is produce communication to residents on what they are allowed or not allowed to do with regard to irrigation systems.
perfect. Okay, thank you.
We'll have some need to, in developing that document, address those issues.
Okay.
All right, 1.3 is develop a plan on how to best manage the oak trees and hardwoods throughout the community. Again, this would be the landscape committee working with Brightview.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and that kind of plan could be done within the next year.
I suppose.
I
Okay,
think that the engagement of, the certified arborist to come up with guidelines on that would be applicable.
I do too.
how about a plan to extend the sidewalk and through the preserve walk? Shouldn't use the word sidewalk. A plan to extend the preserve walk. And that would be sort of a long-term plan, as was suggested. It might be incremental over a period of years. So who would develop that plan?
I think we would turn this over to a project team.
Okay,
How do the rest of you feel about that? That way it can be an ongoing activity and the project team can develop the plan.
I think that probably first what we should do is contact Southwest Florida Water Management District and find out whether or not they would allow us to apply for a permit to increase the length of the boardwalk. I know that that may be time consuming and I don't know what would have to go into it. They may have to do like environmental impact study on the area that we're looking at. And then there has to be a certified, qualified, licensed company that actually does the boardwalks that is licensed by the state to be able to do things in the preserve to mitigate their footprint. So it may be that we do some exploratory research ahead of time before we get into the how does it go and where does it go and what's the length or how is it going to wander or move. I think that there's also some concerns with its ingress egress, as it's just exactly between two people's homes and there's no parking and there's no, the only access is really to almost walk right next to somebody's pool cage and garage and right next to, Dr. Croc's property. I think that there has to be some consideration taken into that as well.
okay, so for this item, we'll say within the next year, an exploratory research on what is feasible, and that involves, contact with the Southwest Florida Water Management District, and then within 2 years, develop a plan, given that step one would be there is some feasibility. Brownie?
Well, I think, I don't know if it's long-term strategic. I think there's another aspect. We need to fix the rotted boards and the rotted things, not on the strategic plan. That just needs to be done before, and that's a fairly small job, I think, that even our own guys could do.
They
But-
did. The rotted
What?
board up on top that was there the other day was replaced. But yes, that's an ongoing maintenance issue for us.
Yeah, okay, so just don't want to lose that. Don't want to wait 2 years, because it looks kind of shabby right now.
It needs constant care and upkeep. I agree.
Before we worry about extending it, let's get it looking decent.
Okay, 1.5 and 1.5A talk about the front entrance specifically, while we'll talk about the monuments later on. These two are tied together, of course. This one's talking more about the landscaping at the front entrance. And 1.5A would be a crucial step, doing an engineering survey on what will be allowed in terms of more monument changes before you would do any landscape enhancements. So what is the time frame and who would be overseeing some of this? Yes, Chap.
I don't really understand this one because it seems to me we're talking about two issues here. You know, issue number one is, I'll say simply, the landscaping by the monuments. Issue number two is the whole subject of monument replacement / change. And I'm not sure what we're talking about in 1.5 and 1.5A. Are we talking about both?
In a way, because they're interrelated. The idea was we wouldn't want to, as a community, invest in enhancing and beautifying the landscaping if they're going to be just torn out in 3 years for changes to the actual monuments.
I don't know if I agree with that. I mean, it seems to me they're independent. I mean,
Okay.
the subject of making the front entrance look better through beautifying the landscaping is independent of what we might do 3, 4, 5 years down the road to completely replace the monuments.
So based on what you're suggesting, Jack, 1.5A, we shouldn't even have. We should just focus on 1.5. Lanny?
It seems to me that 1.5 gets covered by 1.1 and 1.1A. I don't
agree.
know why that we have it separately here.
Yeah, I don't either,
Well-
Lanny. I mean, it seems to me, it
Lindy up?
seems to me the issue we've discussed time after time after time after time is a complete redo of the monuments.
Go ahead, Lindia.
I think this came up, Chat, because we had talked about extending the beds and changing the levels and that sort of thing out front for landscaping. And that's when Mark said that we had to have a survey in order to do any of those landscaping changes. So I think that got tied in here now because we said, well, we could do the survey, but then they've got to do some sort of a study to decide if we could extend, and so they tied it together. Not that it should be necessarily, but that's how it came about.
Go ahead, Mark.
I think that minor landscaping changes can probably be made out there without any problems. We have done that in the past. However, any changes to the physical monument itself, other than cosmetic for painting purposes or changing the lettering on the walls. But if we're going to change stuff and extend or put height or make them broader or do anything of that sort, that's going to require the survey and permitting. I I think that, we can do probably some minor landscaping changes to the existing area. However, it's probably limited in scope simply because of the land that exists there.
Okay, so we have discussion of more significant changes to the monuments as part of amenity augmentation. If we're just talking about in the near term, just beautifying the landscaping, as been pointed out by Lanny, that could be just covered under 1.1, and we can only do 1.5 and 1.5A for right now. We'll monuments later on. Yes, Chap.
I propose we remove
Okay,
1.5 and 1.5A.
right.
Because as Lanny said, what we're talking about here is going to be covered in one.
Yes. So if we're just beautifying, that's covered in 1.1, and under amenity augmentations, long-term, we'll be addressing changes to the monuments.
Yes.
So unless anybody objects, I'm going to eliminate 1.5 and 1.5A at this time. Okay.
Let me just clarify.
Okay.
We will not have any language specific to monuments if we do that.
Not
The
under
language specific to
landscaping.
monuments is under the strategic area of amenity augmentation. And we'll
Okay.
get to that. Because that's a physical structure, it's under the amenities. And we do have coverage of it there. Versus landscaping. Are you okay with that, Paul?
I am if everyone else is. I just don't want to lose the concept of the entryway and the monuments. To me, it seems very distinct, and I think we're burying it in our language here. But that's
I
just
think
my
under-
reaction.
Paul, let's see what happens when we get to, I don't think there's any intent in burying it. I'm concerned about duplication, and that's not helpful. So if when we get to amenities, you don't feel like we're doing enough, then we can come back. But it seems like, I think that we'll be having all this language under amenity enhancement very clearly.
Yeah,
I
we
guess
have a lot of detail.
I guess my issue is I don't see a monument as an amenity. I see an amenity as something we can use. I guess that's my, otherwise I don't have a problem moving it there. I'm just thinking
I
we're
agree.
losing.
I agree there, that I don't see our monument as an amenity.
Well, as a matter of fact, I'm looking at the amenity right now. One option is maybe we ought to take it out or take the 5.3 and this 1.5 and combine them together into the landscaping would make more
Okay.
sense. In other words, make it
That's
a
fine.
landscaping, but the wording is probably more definitive in the amenities, 5.3. Okay. You look
Right,
at,
so the suggestion is that all items for 5.3, we're going to move into landscaping.
yeah,
The
we're going to
strategic area of landscaping enhancements.
combine it with 1.5.
Right.
Maybe it's 1.5, but move in the 5.3 and the 1.5. It's kind of duplicate, really, if you read it.
Right.
It's a little bit more detailed in amenities.
24, if you have the document in front of you, page 24 is a discussion of the front entrance and the monuments. And 5.3 includes conduct a renewal of the front entrance and monuments. And part of that, the subpoints are do a county survey of the front entrance for setbacks, etc. Establish a desired front entrance new look, solicit resident feedback, determine how to pay for the modifications, and create a phased installation. So we'll move all of that into landscaping. Does that
I
sound
agree.
appropriate?
Yeah, I
I'm
agree
good
with,
that.
I agree with
Okay.
Paul. It's not really an amenity.
Right.
It's landscaping or under
No,
it.
Well, it's hardscaping.
It's hardscape, which is part of landscape.
Yeah, right. It's the look.
Yes. So we're moving 5.3 and 3A and 3B.
all the way to 3E it goes on the next page. But yes, we'll move that all to combine with 1.5. Lanny?
I just suggest then we change 1.0 to landscaping and hardscaping improvements.
Okay, very good. That's a good addition.
So that is now landscaping and hardscape improvements.
Okay. And that makes sense too, because if we go to 1.6, that is actually a hardscaping issue when we talk about looking at the fountains, especially the water feature in front of the clubhouse. Falls under the hardscaping. Okay, so for 1.6, producing a plan for enhancing the fountains, that would be in the lake, and the water feature at the clubhouse. Who would develop that plan, and when would we want to have that plan? Is that also the landscaping committee who takes care of that, or is that a special project team?
Well, I think the landscaping should have something to do with it so that everything is coordinated.
Okay. Linda, is there anybody else that should be involved besides the landscaping committee?
Well, I think obviously you're going to need
You could,
maybe the design, maybe ASC. I don't know. I know you've got to include Brightview for some of it, and you've got to include the water doctors for some of it.
we may want a project team here, particularly if we do this throughout the community. Number one, to get some input from everyone, and number two, to promote the plan and the concept. And thirdly, to make sure that everyone is treated equally in this endeavor. It could be an issue in some communities, so I think the more people you have involved here, the better off you're going to be.
Right. So
Very good. So we'll say,
I'm sorry, I was going to say, I think that any project team should have a representative from the landscaping committee.
Oh, sure. And probably a few members from the landscaping committee.
Yeah.
when would that be within 2 years or within the next year? Terry, your hand up.
Yeah, I think it should be within the next year, but I'm a little bit concerned if we're going to have a project team. I don't want to leave too many things out. So I'd like to have the project team be involved with the fountain in front of the clubhouse, the monument in the front and the back, so that the project team, you're gonna put a bunch of people together and let them have 3 specific items to deal with, and whatever else they come up with, if there's some lake and things that they want to do as well. That way you leave no stone unturned.
So are you suggesting that any changes to the monuments out front should be the same project team?
Yes. Yes, because what you're going to do is you're going to incorporate a group of people rather than having a separate project team for different projects. If you do them with all three, a lot of the information that they're going to get is going to come from the same sources anyway, because they have to develop engineering for the various changes. Obviously, with Mark's help, they're going to have to come up with a plan that goes to the county and actually the state, I would imagine, because it's a state highway, and involved with the monuments as well. So I just don't want to have a large group of project teams, maybe just one to take care of all three.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Chuck.
I think that's a good idea. I mean, basically what we're talking about is, to put it into our new terms, a project team to look at hardscape, possible hardscape changes to study, including the monuments, the fountains, and the clubhouse water feature. It would seem to me to be a good hardscape project team, sure.
Okay. I think that's good. We'll label it hardscape project team, and that would embody a number of different projects.
Let's hear from Mark.
I don't have a problem with that. I think that, you know, the fountains are an aesthetic feature. If there's going to be major changes to the existing waterfall at the front of the clubhouse, you know, that's going to be an engineering. It's going to take some time to figure out what we could do there and have somebody plan it. But I think that same, you know, engineering landscape sort of architect designer that would be helpful in the monuments out front would probably be the same person to assist us in those aesthetic design changes to the clubhouse, you know, front as well. Simply, that's because I think that's what they would do for other properties.
Okay. Linda?
Yes, I bring this up not based on the survey, but I have been in communities lately, and I noticed that a few of them are now starting to have a piece of sculpture throughout in their communities. And that's something I hadn't noticed until lately. And I don't know if that's something that we might keep in mind along the road if we ever wanted to commission something that would be significant to Sterling Oaks. I just think it's something we should keep in mind.
Good point. Brownie?
Mark, do we know the impact of the proposed, which probably going to happen, revision to the old 41, how that might affect our back entrance? Do we know anything about that? Is that going to?
I haven't gotten any new news on where that stands, other than they're still in the.
But there must be some kind of plan. Does it expand our way or the other way? Do we know it all?
I haven't seen the written plan. I think that they were doing the traffic studies and doing a lot of the what if scenarios. I think our easement, you know, has the water on it. I don't think that they can change that ditch and change that water feature to any great degree. So I don't think they're going to encroach upon our side. So.
But Brownie makes a good point in terms of considering the rear entrance as we consider the front entrance also.
This is true.
And to what extent, we don't know, but if we're going to group these things together, we might as well include the back gate also.
Well, I think you should probably say all monuments, just so that you have a consistency if you do changes.
Great.
Good. All right. So go ahead, Paul.
It was mentioned earlier that we set a time frame on this thing. I don't think all of this is going to happen next year for certain. I think we might start exploring this issue, but I don't see these things happening for at least 2 to 3 years.
Right. I was gonna say 1 to 3.
Yeah,
Okay.
if they happen at all. So I think we need to get our time frame.
So within a year, we could have the formation of the hardscape project team.
Right.
They're producing any output would be within 2 or 3 years. Does that make sense?
Good with me.
Okay, Terry, were you gonna ask something?
Yeah, I was just going to talk about what Brownie had mentioned about Old 41. The only issue that I can see is that they plan on putting on 4 lanes. And the question is if the 4 lanes come all the way through past our back gate, whether or not we're going to have ingress and egress in only one direction or 2. And that's something that is to be determined.
All right, 1.7. 1.7 is looking at the buffers between the perimeter of Sterling Oaks and adjoining communities, All Seasons and Versailles. Is that going to be something that's monitored, or is that something that we should assign to the landscaping committee and it's just ongoing?
I think it's part of number 1.
I'm not sure I understand it.
I don't
Well,
think,
part of our discussions when we were talking about landscaping issues was making sure that there is enough of a plantings, whether it's done by Sterling Oaks or by All Seasons, let's say, for example, that with time will mature to provide the desired buffer between the communities.
I see. It's Versailles. Versailles. That's
Oh,
I
okay.
understand now.
I think that's landscaping and Mark.
I think 17, 18, and 19 all fall under 1. They're not deserving of specific issues in a strategic plan, in my opinion.
Okay. So you're saying 1.7 through 1.9, that'll all be fall under 1.1.
Yeah. And Linda, you got a horribly difficult job here.
Thank you, Jeff. I'm only on the board another year, I think.
So
We're
we'll
gonna go
raise
to
your
Mark and
pay.
then we'll go to Lanny. Mark, what are we gonna add?
Oh, for Saul, for instance, their landscaping plan is specific to their PUD and the city of Bonita
Got
Springs
nothing else to do.
that specifically has dictated what they must do. Any further enhancements on their part would be solely voluntary and nothing that we could really do except for to ask them. Same to some degree with All Seasons. When they did their landscaping plan, we had to make sure that we were cognizant of what Collier County had specifically designed for them. We asked that they create a landscaping buffer and berm to manage not only the water drainage, but what the residents here would like down the road. They did complete that. We were in touch with them during the building phases. However, they still, anything enhanced, anything different would be solely voluntary on their part, because we just don't have, the ability to change somebody else's landscaping unless they want to do it.
Right, but then there is the opportunity if needed that Sterling Oaks might change some of their landscaping to address the lack of satisfaction with what is being done with say, All Seasons.
Which we've done in several areas already.
Yeah. Already.
All right, Lanny?
2 things. One, to your last point, Mark, I wonder if we have recently looked, for example, at All Seasons to see if all the plants that they were required to plant have survived. So to see if they have actually fully implemented their plan. So I think that's the kind of assessment that we were talking about here. Secondly, I think that all these bullet points, I encourage that they be included in the landscaping in some way, shape, or form. I'm not sure it has to be within the strategic plan, but I think they are clear directions from the board to the landscaping committee that we want all these things looked at. So I don't want them lost.
Yeah,
That's a
I
good
wouldn't
point.
want them to be lost either, Lanny, but I think to Chap's point, they could be 1.1B, 1.1C.
Okay, yeah, okay,
They're
great.
still falling under the 1.1, the landscaping plan overall. Paul?
I think quickly and anecdotally, I noticed that Versol has put in some plantings on our north border, and they're substantial trees, and they should be in by now, so we may want to take a look at that. And that's just an anecdotal statement that they are moving along.
Oh, good. Lindia?
I noticed that all seasons too, or 4 seasons, whatever it is, they, I did not know in the beginning that they were going to have the pond with a nice fountain in it. So that was kind of a pleasant surprise to us. So sometimes they go beyond what was promised.
Good.
Is that right, Mark?
That was part of the original plan.
It
The
was part of
fountain?
their original plan, but
Yeah.
I didn't realize it was gonna be the way it was.
No, I know. It looks so different than, yeah. Okay.
All right, let's turn to 1.10, which is irrigation. So 1.10 through, who would be responsible for looking at determining what is necessary for addressing irrigation issues going forward in terms of budgetary issues? That'd just be the board of directors?
Finance committee?
Okay.
Now, wait a minute. Why the finance committee?
Because
I think-
they proposed our reserves.
I think this should be, before we farm it out to one of our committees, I think this has to be a board responsibility, number one, and something we should be on top of. I mean, we
Okay,
have a broad representation here, and you know my concern about this.
So
well,
1.10 would be the board of directors. Chap, what do we say?
I think 1.10, 1.10A, and 1.10B. I volunteer along with Mark to be the responsible party to deal with all of it.
Okay, so now we specifically have 2 individuals identified. Reactions to that?
Thanks, Chap.
There's one reaction.
Yeah, well, again, I think this is a broad responsibility. I think we need to have more input than 2 people on this issue. And just based on the last 2 meetings, we've had a lot of controversy about whether this is a problem or not, where the problem is, and exactly what the problem is.
So
So I
to your
think-
point, Paul, Chap and Mark can be part of a project team.
That's fine with me. I think we need some broad representation here.
I'd be glad to help out Chap and Mark as well.
Paul,
Go ahead.
don't you feel that the infrastructure in general needs a whole board approach? You know what I mean? It's not just irrigation, it's roads, it's plumbing, it's all those things that it just seems like it's all interrelated to me.
Well, it is, but the issue with the irrigation to me is you've got half the community that says it's not a problem, and you've got a good chunk of the community that says it is a problem. So I don't know. This is a
Well-
controversial issue for me.
Paul, the reality is the irrigation question had like 42% that put neutral, which simply means that they don't have enough information. And that would be, easy to understand that most people don't have an awareness of what are the specific issues as it relates to the irrigation system. So from a community perspective, most people recognize that they're not aware or have any knowledge necessary to form an opinion one way or another with regard to this issue.
Exactly.
Yeah. But that doesn't mean that it's not an issue. It's just that it's not something that is readily visible to them.
Understood.
Yeah, I have a question. My regard for the irrigation system, and as much that I got involved, was basically due to Mark. And Mark, you've been fairly silent about this, and perhaps you can enlighten us to what your concerns are, because it's not a question of building something new. As far as I'm concerned, it's a question of being able to determine whether or not the life of our system is at the time where we need to plan to replace. Mark, maybe you can, move towards us in that direction, sir?
I would have to say that there's three basic components of the irrigation system. There's the pumps themselves, which are in the reserves to be maintained and replaced over time. There are the large, heavy-duty PVC pipes that are about 3 to 4 feet below the ground that carry the main water supply throughout the existing community that utilizes that water, including the condominiums. What we found is that the problems that have occurred over the past few years are really at junctions where the pipes are either have a T or a 90, or they're joined with other pipes, downsized, and those lateral lines. We have to remember that we're utilizing, if you want to call it, natural pond water that really can contain, a lot of small sand particles or dirt or other debris that as that water goes around these corners under pressure over time creates the erosion on those pipes that create the leaks that we have. The main line pipes that are 6 to 8 inches coming off of the pumps themselves are massive PVC pipes that probably the length of those are not going to be an issue for 100 years because they're encased and they're down. So replacing that huge infrastructure is probably not going to be an issue for us over time. I think what's going to happen is that this is what we're seeing now is in areas within the community. There's been 3 in Manatee lately. There's been 2 or 3 in Wildcat lately. That the junctions and the turns and the T's are starting to fail, and those are being replaced. Once those are replaced, those areas probably have another life of another 30 to 40 years easily once they're done. So I guess if the biggest question about the irrigation that I think that everybody's nervous about is the individual lawns or the areas in the common areas or the areas in the condominiums that are off that main line and are going to the actual heads that spray the water. What do those lines look like and how are those maintained? And that's probably the biggest issue. I would say that you know, what we're finding is that in the past, for some weird reason, the homeowners really never paid for upgrades or repairs to their irrigation system around their homes. We do know that the condominiums themselves have had to pay for their upgrades and repairs around their buildings. So there's been a bit of a disparity there. We are trying to wrap our hands around it. So I think that that's the biggest issue that I see is ongoing repairs to the end of the sprinkler line. In other words, the pumps are the very beginning, the big lines are the infrastructure, and the end result is the water spraying out of the heads. That if you want to call it that little bit of infrastructure in people's yards or condominiums where the water comes out of that pipe into the heads in the common areas seems to be our biggest concern and our biggest repair bills of late, simply because of the age of that system. So I think that that's probably where our focus has got to be centered on, is how to manage and how to deal with that effectively.
I would agree with all of that. I think another issue might be the source and volume of water too. And that's something that we might look into. I mean, at one point it said it was impossible to put the sports well in. We had all these complications and problems and permitting issues. And we worked through that, and lo and behold, we got the well that saved us thousands of dollars every year. So that's another thing that we may need to look into.
I'm going to go to Lanny and then Chap and then Brownie.
I have a metric that I recommend. I think would be helpful and I think possible starting with 2020 for us to get a report on a monthly basis of the irrigation expenditures for the common area repairs, as well as a report on how much homeowners are being charged for their repairs. And by looking at this monthly, we're going to be able to get an idea or a better idea of what actually is going on. I think that that should be obtainable from Brightview.
I'm going to go to Chap and then Brownie.
If you look at 110, 110A, and 110B, seems the only thing that there is an appetite for, mainly because Mark seems pretty confident that the mainline underground pipes with occasional needs to repair things at joints should last us for 30 years. Right, Mark?
Yes.
All right. Therefore, the only thing that I see actionable at this point in 110, 110A, and 110B is to take a look based on history if we have adequate reserves to cover the repair needs.
I think that there's two things. Sorry, Brownie, but I think there's two areas there. There's the one of the reserve needs that are specific to the common line infrastructure.
Yes, yes, yeah.
Goes across. And the second is whether or not if there is going to be, with looking at Lanny's metrics, whether or not there needs to be some kind of change or movement of dollars to be able to accommodate the needs to maintain the homeowners' lawns within
Well, that's
their
111.
assessments.
That's
to manage
111.
those repairs.
That's what 111 was supposed to be. 111 was supposed to be to communicate clearly to the homeowners where Brightview / the association's responsibility ends and where yours begins. That was what 111 was supposed to be.
I think that that's
Brownie?
probably, yes, the separation between church and state, yeah.
And that's easy to do. All we have to do is tell them.
Well,
Go ahead,
wait a
Brownie.
minute.
Brownie should.
Let's,
I
let
just-
me,
I was next, I think. I just had a question. Mark, how many pump stations and how many lakes do we use? I've never
We have
been able to
two-
get that defined.
2 pump stations, 2 lakes, 1, if you want to call it, they're all intertwined through a common aquifer, but we have 2 main lakes that we pull the water from.
Okay, so 2 pump stations then?
Correct.
1 for each lake, okay. And
Paul?
one of them, one is down by Preserve, the other one is up near Wildcat?
The one, yeah, it's right behind the coach homes at the beginning of Wildcat Lake there, right
Okay,
into the coach homes, the beginning of Wildcat. The other is right there next between Willow Bend and Deer Creek.
okay.
Go ahead, Paul.
I just wanted to clarify one thing that was just mentioned. I don't think it's a matter of having Brightview tell us what the issues are with our individual lawns and simply charge us or put that in the budget. I'm telling you, currently, it appears that over half the community have no issue with the irrigation system. The condos and the coach homes take care of the issues and they pay for them. And I feel it should be the same thing throughout the community. So I don't think this is an issue that should expand our budget.
No, no, I don't know how you got that impression.
Okay, well, we're clarifying it.
Go ahead, Lanny.
I think the only indication that there may need to be a budget expansion is that we only have 10,000 to repair all those joints that we see being dug up. And it certainly is my sense that there's more and more of that every year. And I don't know, Mark, if you have information of whether we spent more than 10,000 on that last year. I definitely think we need to monitor to see if we spend more than 10,000 on that this year.
Well, I would agree.
I think that's fine.
All I'm saying, I agree with you, Lanny. All I'm saying here is let's eliminate 110. Let's eliminate 110B and let Mark and I study 110A and give you a recommendation.
I'll go ahead. You can get that information from not only from Brightview, but from, Cezanne's been cataloging all of that into the system as she gets these different invoices.
Okay. And if she can get, she can ask Brightview what they're charging homeowners. I think that's important information for us to know about. I'm not sure we're going to change anything about it, but I think it's just information that we should have.
So Chap has suggested that we take 110, 110A and 110B and combine it into just one single item that a
Which,
team will address.
and that single item is 110A.
I'm okay with that.
Yeah, me too.
That's fine.
Okay.
But we still have, I'm being really persistent on this one. If we can agree on that, let's go to 111, because that's the one that we're talking in circles.
All right. So 111 is looking at coming up with a way to communicate to residents, the homeowners, what is allowed and what is not allowed, or what is the end of what's Brightview's responsibility and what is the homeowner's responsibility. Chap?
That is the issue. It's not what they're allowed to do and not allowed to do. I'll give you an example of the issue. I'm suddenly not getting any water. Brightview comes over and says, the problem is you got a broken pipe between what I'll call the main and your sprinkler heads, okay?
Mhm.
Well, fine. I want to know who's going to pay for that. And I think the answer is me. But nobody knows this. So we need to communicate that. That's the issue.
So a clear understanding of what is the homeowner's responsibility and what is not really Brightview's, but the community's responsibility.
Exactly. That should be easy to do.
Lanny, you were going to add?
I thought last time, Mark, you said that Brightview had developed a price chart that we were going to be able to get out to people, giving them estimates on the kinds of costs for improvements and repairs.
I got that. I kind of wanted to review it. I had some questions about specifics on that. So I have, but I do have that and it's ready to go out.
Maybe a couple of us can take a look at it also before it goes out to
I have
see
no
how,
problem with that.
Well,
to see how it addresses these issues.
I agree with you, Lanny. That's
Yeah.
a really good idea, but it has to be accompanied by an explanation of why we'd ever send it out. And the
Right,
explanation,
right.
the
Well, let's look at,
explanation is,
let's look at what they've done and add some stuff to it.
the explanation is the HOA's responsibility stops here, and that's where yours starts. That's what we really need.
Yeah. Well, if you, Mark, if you get that to us, then we can work on doing more.
I'm going to send it all to you right now.
Okay,
So that'll be a joint effort of the board of directors and the GM in terms of developing that communication and distributing that to the resident owners.
Perfect.
Be done within this year. Paul, you're going to speak, and then Lindia.
Well, you actually just covered it. As long as we're all involved in this thing, and I wanted to get back to Lindia's point about people not watering their lawns, and that has to be part of the communications, and that they not tamper with the schedules.
I can read you that from our rules. It says for each lot connected to the underground sprinkler system, the association shall control the days and times of irrigating lots.
Right, so that just needs to be reinforced.
Right.
Right.
Of course.
And I think Michael, has the ASC ever fined anyone for that?
For lawns,
For tampering with the days and
That's right.
times of irrigating
No.
lots?
we would not have known that even happened. So unless there was a lawn issue, and we have not really addressed lawn issues. One of the other things that keeps coming up is who is responsible for the area between the homeowner's lot and the sidewalk, and the road, between the sidewalk and the road. Everybody, the homeowners tend to think that's common property.
No, it is not. That's, if you look at your lots, I think you'll find that sidewalks are easements, but your property goes out to the street line. That can be checked. Do you know, Mark? That's my understanding. I think I've asked the question before, that little strip where you have a sidewalk, that strip on the other side of the sidewalk is part of the homeowner's property.
And that's true everywhere. That's not just a Sterling Oaks issue.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. I mean, that's the common, that's
There
true.
seems to
Not
be
just-
an understanding that's common.
And of course, if you're on the side of the street where there's no sidewalk, there are some, it's not even an issue, okay? You know. And by the way, Lanny, what you read doesn't apply to I'm not saying there's something else, doesn't apply. We're not connected to underwater. So that doesn't really apply to Deer Creek and Sanctuary Point. We're not connected to the underwater system.
Go ahead, Lindia.
Yeah, I'd like a little help here. Let's say a homeowner isn't getting any water, so they talk to Brightview and Brightview says there's a broken pipe. How in the past has that been handled? Do they just take Brightview's word for that? Or could it be a damaged sprinklers from the lawnmower going over it? I mean, where where do we come in on protecting the homeowner from, from having to tear up his yard and put in a whole pipe that he may or may not need? I'm a little leery of that.
Yeah, they do snap off heads sometimes with lawnmowers when they're left up.
How does it work now? What do you do, Mark, if somebody says, I'm not
Mark's
getting any
gone.
water? I
Mark's
see.
gone for the moment.
Thank you, Mark.
That's
No,
too
but
tough a
yeah.
question. You ran him awfully.
I know.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I had a long conversation with Christopher last week. He's their irrigation head guy.
Yeah.
And he indicated that things like that are replaced by Brightview. That happens without any question or problem. And then when it is something that the homeowner is going to be responsible for a major issue, they are told ahead of time. And they have the opportunity to ask about the cost and that sort of thing.
So they can just come dig on your property without anybody in the office knowing or anything? You could just have somebody coming and digging and
Yeah,
in the new
I don't, Suzanne, you may know, I don't think that they necessarily go through the office for those kinds of repairs on homeowner lots.
Well, I think you're talking about two separate things. A sprinkler head doesn't cause any lawn
No,
damage.
no,
Talk
right.
about
But
a line on the homeowner's property.
like, Chap, what you had done, did the office know that you were having that repaired?
I just gave you that as an example of what the problem is. I've never had the problem.
Oh,
But
okay. I thought you did.
You
If I had the problem, I couldn't refer to anything to tell me who's responsible.
Okay,
Yeah.
yeah, and we're gonna work on that. I want to go back to Brownie's question. Going back to a previous line within our rules, under single-family homes, resident-specific, item number 2 starts out, each home within Sterling Oaks must be equipped with an underground sprinkler system designed to irrigate all landscape portions of the home. So Brownie, I think the fact that you've got underground pipes, even though your pipes aren't filled with pond water, I think our rule about timers does apply.
It doesn't apply. That specifically says connected to the underwater distribution system. You
Okay,
read.
we don't need to get
Lanny,
into
don't try to get into
weeds.
semantics, okay?
We're in
You
the
know-
weeds right now. So
Okay.
Okay,
Um,
but I just want to raise this. This is a critical point for us to understand.
I know.
Because I don't read it the way Brownie's reading it, and at another time.
Well,
we
you
need to
never
figure
read
this
anything
out.
the way I read it, Lanny. But
Well,
it does
again,
not,
this is,
we are not connected to the underground system.
all right, this is a specific issue that we don't need to be addressing in terms of the strategic plan. Now, related to this though, is 1.12, and Jack has pointed out that he doesn't believe that this is a board issue, that 1.12 looking into, is there a way to provide watering for Deer Point and the sanctuary residents with underground water? That should not be a board issue. That's an HOA issue. Do we agree with what Jack's point was on that issue?
Well,
You need to clarify that. I don't understand that.
Yeah, I mean, there is, the HOA is the board.
Yeah.
Okay, well,
So
that's
I'm not-
my lack of understanding.
Yeah,
Brownie?
yeah, no, I don't know what Jack's talking about either. I think he just thinks that maybe it should be a Sanctuary Point issue, but if Sanctuary Point had a sub-association, then that would make sense, but they
That's what I
don't.
was assuming. Okay.
Yeah, we're the only ones for Sanctuary Point and half of Deer Creek. So I think that this is an issue, and it needs to be part of the strategic plan, as Paul said, about possibly a well, as well as some of these other issues.
yeah.
All right, we'll go to Brownie and then Lindia.
Yeah, well, one of the things, if you go in and read the documents, there's a provision if the association provides certain things to certain parts and not everybody, it can be assessed individually just to those who get it.
Right.
If you let it technically and legally, Sanctuary Point and Deer Point should have been getting a credit for whatever the pumps and the reserves on all of that money that might be spent, which isn't a lot, but we've never worried about it. It's not that much money, okay? So technically, technically there's some reduction in assessment there should be doing that. The other thing is, how would you feel if we said, okay, 10-year, they're going to pay the full thing, but they're not going to get to use the dining facilities, or they can't use the pickleball, or they can't use the bocce. It's kind of what we've got in the water situation. We've got water that belongs with the lakes, the pump systems, the underground system belongs to the association, but we don't provide it to Deer Creek and Sanctuary Point. Well, under the documents, there should either be a reduction in those costs or we should provide it, okay? Now, if we, so look at it that way. How would you feel if you were in your area, you were paying for the bocce courts and the dining room and whatever it is, but you weren't allowed to use it? That's really the situation.
Lindia? Thank you, Brownie.
Right. So actually, when you buy a piece of property in a community, it comes stated in the documents what amenities come with your maintenance fee. And if you buy in a community that has a capital contribution, some parts of the community are paying a big capital contribution fee for infrastructure, others are not, depending on when you bought and what the terms of your purchase were. So when you buy into Sterling Oaks and you bought at that time into Sanctuary Point or that part of Deer Creek, irrigation water was not part of your benefits.
Okay, I appreciate all your comments, but again, I want to keep us focused on the strategic issue and not some of these, whether there needs to be some type of change in billing or in the documents. The question is it worth a strategic issue for the board to continue to pursue? Is there a way to provide water, underground water to Deer Point and Sanctuary? And is that something that should be looked into? Even though it's been explored in the past, persistence sometimes pays off. Paul?
Well, I think if I were living in either one of those communities and there was a possibility that I could save a significant amount of money over the next few years, I'd want to pursue that option. And it appears to me that if you could do a well in that area and save thousands of dollars in the future, I would like to explore that, even if the manifestation of that might cost me a little money, but I would save money in the long run. I would like to enter into that study. So I think that the board has nothing to lose here, and Sanctuary Point and Deer Creek has everything to gain.
I agree.
All right, Chad.
Somebody give me a history lesson. Why is it this way in the first place?
That's a good question.
Incorporated that way.
Well, it's because those homes were built later and there wasn't enough capacity at the time. And so they were added, but added on city water.
Well, we don't know if it's the cost of capacity. It might have been just cost the developer might not have spent it. I don't think we really, I think Chap's question's a good one, but I don't think we really know the real reason.
Well, it's
Right,
more
so
curiosity.
as a strategic item, we're going to continue to pursue to see if there is any way possible that we can feasibly, under county approval, add wells to provide underground watering to those communities. You're smirking, Mark.
Oh, it's just, I think that my predecessors, going back some time, from what I understand, looked into the feasibility and what South Florida Water Management District allowed from a permittable amount of water to be taken out of the aquifer was X. I think that we've asked for a change in that, at least I think before me, I think it was either Brenda or Kim asked for an increase to that amount of X million gallons per year. When I went to get the sports well, we had to use a specifically different aquifer and apply for a different permit for that. I would say that once again, we'd have to go back to the district, talk to them about the usage, what we could get for Sanctuary and Deer Creek, and the amount of gallonage that they may use on a, let's say, an annual basis, and whether or not it would be feasible for them to agree to supply, that amount of gallonage out of the aquifers, or possibly supplement the existing situation with it. Either way it goes, I think that if Sanctuary Point or Deer Creek decided that they wanted to get onto a irrigation well program, the amount of, it would be a fairly one-time expensive cost for them to get hooked up and move forward with it. The paybacks would be there over time, but it'd be a pretty hefty bill right from the get-go.
Okay.
Go ahead, Bernie.
Want to make a point here, Mark. Do you realize that basically if you look at land, if you added Deer Point and Sanctuary Point, you would probably have about a 20 or 25% increase, okay? Do you realize that what Brightview has done over what Leo, he's increased, because they've gone to 3 times a week instead of twice, they've gone to longer. I calculated it out somewhere between 100 and 150%. So I guess we're in violation, and we could be fined right now by the South Water District because Brightview has increased the usage of that water probably at least 100%, and you're telling me we can't do 25%. So you realize we violated that?
We file our quarterly reports with the district, and Alan keeps up with that, and we maintain our integrity with that.
Well,
We're in touch with Brightview on that. They're well aware of the gallonage and the permit usage. What you folks are using in Deer Creek and Sanctuary is city water. It doesn't apply to South Florida.
No, you're not following me. You're not following me. Brightwood in the common area has increased the.
We don't know that for sure. We're watching.
I know it because I walk by them and I've timed them and I know how many days they are in my common areas. Okay?
That's a discussion for outside of this meeting.
I've measured it. Okay, at least in the common areas
Chap,
down here, it is way up.
I want to try to settle this. This is an issue worth looking at. I don't know how we go about doing it. However, thinking out of the box, it seems to me that there are 2 issues. Each has its own costs and each has its own practicalities. There's like 2 solutions. Each has its own costs, each has its own practicalities. Those 2 solutions are potentially a well, or 2, and don't say, no, you can't do that because I don't know. Why can't we hook up Deer Creek and Sanctuary Point to the current system?
Right, we will.
I don't know.
Questions that need to be answered, and that's why this is remaining on the strategic plan. So we are going to continue to explore this issue. That's an important issue. It's clear from our discussion this morning that this is an important issue that necessitates board investigation with the GM and to look at alternative solutions and what are the costs and the feasibility. All right, let's turn our attention to strategic issue 2.
Well, who's the accountable party on this?
I put down the board of directors and the GM.
All right.
You have other suggestions?
No.
Okay. All right, let's turn our attention to community well-being. And our first issue is looking at safety, a community speeding control plan. This has sub-points attached to it, but this idea of developing a community speeding control plan, which is already on your radar, is already one of your areas of focus as a board. So is this just a general board of directors as the accountable party, or is there a project team or some other group that needs to be involved? Chat.
Everything from 2.1 to 20, well, the 2.1 is it's all part of 2.1.
Right.
And
on a video meeting.
as far as I'm concerned, we've talked about these things, it's a matter of who's going to be accountable to give the board a plan that incorporates all of these things. As far as I'm concerned, it's Mark.
Okay, so in terms of creating a speeding control plan, we have Mark being nominated. Is there a project team that should be created to, I mean, there is a lot of work if you look at 2.1A through 2.1E in terms of the exploration of options and ideas that would help to control speeding. That is a lot of different items on the table. So should there be a project team addressing this? Mark would be involved, of course. Lanny?
I think that there would be an advantage of developing a project team on this so that there's community buy-in to the solutions. We know that, some people don't like speed humps, some people don't like rumble strips, there's a lot of pros and cons, but I think that one reason to use a project team is to increase buy-in, and I think it would be an advantage here.
Good point, Lanny.
Now,
Yeah, I agree with that. I think the more people we have involved, the more we can promulgate the concept here. That makes sense to me. I think to turn it over to Mark, I don't think it would carry the same clout as if the community knew that we had a group of people working on this and that it is a concern. It's number 3 in terms of our survey results, in terms of what the community expects and wants and needs. So I think probably a project team would be appropriate here. And it's very difficult because when you start talking about, well, we should do this, people complain about it, but they have no idea what to do in this regard. So I think the more people involved, the better. But Mark probably needs to respond here too before he ends up with the whole package.
Well, I
Well, I
think
think
that, we've got a little bit out of the way. The explore the installation of electronic speed devices at 2.1A. We have those were delivered and they're down at the shop. Alan's working on a specific installation. Of course, his question and my question are, where's the best way to utilize the two? And I could use some input from people on that as to speeding. We know that Wildcat's got issues, but we know that the main drag has issues. And is this something that you want to immediately tell people when they come through the main drag going one way, or is it necessary to have one coming from the back gate coming this way? So I think
Are they movable?
They are movable to a degree. We would probably end up creating a movable platform for them, just to make sure that they were, transportable. But yes.
Terry, you're on mute. Terry, you're on mute. You're on mute.
Oh, I'm not now. I'm sorry. One of the concerns that my community members is that these traffic signs flash and so forth, and so they don't want to have it visible to housing, if at all possible. I think that the first sign halfway between the in gate to the stop sign would be the most visible to set up people to say, okay, we're really, really serious about your speed and keeping it into a proper area. The second area is a question mark, whether it is Wildcat or the back gate. I kind of lean towards the back gate because that also gives you the opportunity to take a look at as you come through the gate. Okay, this is what the community expects, and we're measuring you to make sure that you comply with our speed laws.
Okay, so with these electronic speed signs, we know that while they're not easily movable, they are movable. So if we're forming a project team to address speeding control in the community, that project team can develop a plan for determining how long and when these new electronic speed signs should be placed in different parts throughout the community as a function of time. So that determination can be made by the project team. In the meantime, Mark can initially put them anywhere, because we know that after a couple of months, we'll move them to a different location. So we want to get them installed so that we're utilizing them, but the project team can then develop a plan for their movement function of time.
Mark,
Yeah,
having watched it, clearly, I'd say people speed more going out of the back gate than they do coming in. It's something about that going to work or going so if we put one there, I would definitely put it for people who are going out. Probably another thing in considering, you don't want to put it in somebody's front yard. So you've got two possibilities. You can put it where the drainage area is or next to the preserve. In those two areas on the side where there's a sidewalk, those are the two long strips where people do tend to speed, either one of them. But again, you don't want to put them in someone's yard. So that gives you two possibilities of people going out the gate. Coming in the gate, I don't know where you could put them at the preserve, but you wouldn't want to put one anywhere else. I don't think anyone wants them in their front yard. Okay. So that's one.
Because we know this is a community
Right, right.
priority, we're going to create a project team, and we're going to say within the next year, they will develop a plan. Now, some of the installation might be longer than a year, but we know that within a year, we want to have a plan for addressing speeding control. So let's
I just want
now to 2.2, which is a plan for ongoing sidewalk maintenance. Now, there's some sidewalk maintenance that goes on currently. Based on past discussion, that happens one time a year. So we want to have a plan that's more frequent in nature in terms of addressing the root rising of sidewalks that can be a safety hazard. Who would be responsible for doing that?
I would say this is more of an operational thing, and maybe Mark and Alan could handle that. I don't think we need the board's involvement in this. I think this is something that we can kind of routinely do as long as Mark understands it's a board priority. How do you feel about it, Mark?
I think that's fine. And any time that eyes and ears in the neighborhood can assist us in finding areas of concern, then that's fine as well. And we'll be willing to do that. I think Alan is trying to develop an annual plan to do as many areas of concern as possible within a given time period, simply to maximize, the usage of his manpower and also the availability of the reserve funds that are for those sidewalk repairs. He tries to get the worst ones on an ongoing basis. If there is an emergency where oddly one just kind of comes out of the blue, then we'll attack it immediately. But he tries to go through the entire community and get those areas that are worst, which you saw this year. He replaced, I don't know how many cubic yards of concrete and cut out tree roots to be able to manage that situation on the sidewalk. So we can do that on a yearly basis. But if we did have people's eyes and ears out there to help us find those places, that would be great too.
Lanny?
Addressing the eyes and ears issue, I just want to make the point that this would be a useful request to put in our FYI news periodically so that homeowners know that they're encouraged to send locations and they'll be addressed.
Okay, so I'm going to propose we take out 2.2 because that's now an operational issue. Do you include 2.2A in that too? The look of installing pavers as the sidewalk in high traffic area. I would imagine that was more around the various amenities, walk paths from around pickleball and tennis and things of that nature.
That's correct. That's an
Original.
ongoing plan would be to and of course, let's just say that there was the new bocce courts were going to go in someday. That would be an optimal time to be able to redo some of the sidewalk entrances to the tennis and courtyard areas from concrete sidewalks to pavers.
Okay, so 2.2 and 2.2A, I am going to remove from the strategic plan. Does anybody have any objections to that? Okay. 2.3 is our desire to become a blue zone community. Best way of addressing that, would that be through a project team?
Yes.
Okay. Would that be within 1 year or within 2 years?
At least 2 years.
Okay. Number 2.4 is looking at ways of enhancing fitness opportunities. That would be classes on the lawn. That could be forming a bicycle riding club, other things other than what is currently available through the fitness center. Would there be a committee that would be responsible for that, chat?
Lanny, do we have a fitness committee?
We have a fitness center project team. It only addresses the fitness center.
Could their scope be expanded?
I don't know that the people involved would have any interest in expanded responsibilities.
Well, we have two options. We could explore expanding the fitness committee, and we could do it also through the activities committee. So there could be some melding of responsibilities there. If we're talking about expanding programs, that's one thing. I don't know. We have a new fitness project team coming up. They may have more interest in getting active in this regard. Lindia, how do you feel about activities handling some of this?
Well, it's very difficult for us to add programs where you need an instructor because there's so many variables with the cost and insurance and who pays what. I think if you could get some people that might be interested in leading a walking club or a bicycling club, you know, you need specific people that would be interested in doing that. And I mean, we can try to schedule things, but our hands are a little bit tied. We don't have room for aerobics. I think there's a need for it, but I guess it would be nice to have somebody on our activities committee who would emphasize the fitness. Now, I know Marianne Conley got the yoga going, and it was directly through her involvement that we had that.
Well, that's why I mentioned the activities committee.
Yeah, I can ask Marianne maybe and the activities committee if we could expand on that a little bit, but it sure would help if we had somebody from the fitness community.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking.
Yeah.
I think we need a project team that would draw heavily from both members of the Activities Committee and the, what I'll call the current ad hoc fitness committee.
Yeah, because a lot of our constraints are office imposed by insurance and space and that sort of thing.
So in terms of 2.4A and 2.4B, we could look at having a committee formed, as Chap has pointed out, that would involve people from the current fitness committee and the activities committee, ways to expand fitness options.
And C and D.
Okay.
Thank you.
Right. Right.
Okay. And of course, C and D are much longer term, whereas A and B are things that can be done within 1 year, adding a walking group or bicycle group, which you need
Right.
for blue zones anyway. And then looking at space needs can be, 3 to 4 years or 5 years plus in terms of when we would expect a need for something of that nature.
Yeah, I think they're the same project team, just different deadlines.
Okay.
Well, you make a good point about an aspect of the Blue Zone outfit too, melding together with activities and fitness. So I think we may cross lines here with this new team.
Yes.
I think
Okay,
that,
good.
however, I don't think the fitness team, this new project team is the right place to be putting the issue of expanding the clubhouse for additional space. I think that really remains a board responsibility.
Well, again, we're talking 3+ years for that issue in terms of timeframes, correct?
Yeah, probably, but I think it needs to go with, if we expand the footprint for fitness center and then have a place for an outdoor bar and grill, they go together, so
Well,
it really
and-
doesn't have anything to do with
a-
fitness.
And a fitness project team working with conjunction with the Blue Zone project team, they're going to sunset before 3 years anyway.
Right. And we know that we don't have enough space for fitness. I mean, we don't need a project team to tell us that.
Well, they ought to recommend that we do or don't. And all they're doing is recommending.
Well, yeah, okay.
Okay. 2.4D, should that stay or should that just be moved to the discussion of expanding the preserve walk? This is the idea of having some exercise stations on the preserve walk.
Yeah.
I would leave it and let the new project team pick it up as a concept and either move it forward or not, depending on how feasible the expanding the walk would be.
Okay.
But again, we wouldn't lose sight of it. It would be listed here.
2.5, looking at sustainability initiatives that could be installed both in the club as well as throughout the community, trying to encourage more sustainability efforts among all residents. Is that a special project team? I'm looking at 2.5.
I would think so.
Okay.
Paul, when you're thinking about a project team, what kinds of things are you thinking that they would be enhancing or adding to what, because we've made a lot of improvements over the last 5 years administratively. What else are you thinking about that would require a project team?
Well, I'm thinking more of long-term conceptual development of other programs that would enhance what's going on with activities, but just bring a general harmony and accord and cordiality throughout the community. And it might be food drives. It might be a group that collects medical apparatus for people in need. It might be a food bank. Might be any variety of things that would encourage health, safety, and cordiality in the community.
Okay, I thought this was about reuse, renew, recycle.
Well, it
I
could
had
be
a
that
totally
too.
different idea about what
It's
this
just
meant.
that, but broader. So we have the suggestion of a project team. Yeah, that would enhance community engagement. And then some of the activities that this committee would suggest would help to community engagement as well.
Yeah, and of course, one of the first things we would have to define this concept beyond what it says here.
Right. 2.6, Jack suggests that that's just operational. You know, is this something that we want to keep in the plan or just recognize that this needs to be done?
Yeah, I would agree with Jack that it's operational and
immediate.
immediate.
Yeah,
And I think Mark
hopefully
has
it
a
won't be
handle on
necessary.
this.
hopefully it won't be necessary after maybe 6 months or so, if we're lucky.
I think this whole thing has changed the way we're going to live in the future. I think it'll also impact on how we use our staff. And I think
That's
we
true.
may be redirecting some of our staff usage. Without expanding it, we may need to redirect it.
Mark, your thoughts?
You know, it's going to be interesting to see how things are. We're definitely going to be able to do some cross training, if you want to call it. We're definitely going to be able to take on additional responsibilities. I just don't know whether or not, you know, if things break loose, things are going to have to change, and then there's going to be a different paradigm. I'm not quite sure how that's going to affect us from an overall financial standpoint, whether or not it's going to be more cost effective or not. I'm a little torn.
So the impact is definitely going to affect day-to-day operations of the club. Do we keep this in the strategic plan, or we just recognize that this is the new reality and we take it out as a strategic line item?
Take it out.
I think we take it out because I think it's what we're dealing with today, and I would hope that you know, we aren't going to deal with it later. Anecdotally, I had to call the UK this morning to talk to them, and all of those people are still in complete lockdown and working from home completely. They haven't opened up anything in the UK whatsoever. So there are places that are still, you know, completely shut down. Here we are in Florida, and things are what I would call pretty much wide open comparatively to the places up north. I talked to my uncle last night in Baltimore, and they are still completely shut down. So I think that it's something that's going to be around for a while, but I don't know if it's going to be here, something that we're going to be dealing with next summer at this time.
Okay, good. All right, now, we've been talking for 2 hours. We may not have made as much progress as was on the agenda for today, but I thought our discussions this morning were very fruitful and beneficial in terms of helping to streamline the document itself, to clarify what we're focusing on, and to identify some of the further details of who and when some of these items will be achieved. So we've made good progress today. We didn't cover all of the 6 strategic areas, but the first 2 were the most important and the most detailed. So we'll make faster progress as we go forward if we are all available to meet again next week at this time. So can we meet again next Wednesday at 9?
Yeah, sounds good.
Okay. So our agenda next Wednesday will be just to go through the strategic areas 3 through 6 at that time. In the meantime, with regard to the vision and mission statement, I might try to begin that process by having us communicate electronically so that we can move things forward before having the discussion face to face. So I'll send out a communication asking you to reply back to me with some of your thoughts. I'll try to encapture all of those thoughts and then present those facts so we're further down the road before we begin that discussion. Mark?
Great idea.
Just one parting, I guess, one parting shot on that is that I hope that you all truly sort of take into consideration that, you know, we talk about the mission statement, which is today to protect and enhance property values or protect and enhance lifestyle and property values. But when we talk about the club at Sterling Oaks, which we're incorporated as the club at Sterling Oaks, I think somehow we have to understand that all of you that live here truly live here for probably 3 or 4 reasons, and that there are some real commonalities for the reason why you're here in Sterling Oaks and why people buy in Sterling Oaks. And, you know, when you talk about birds of a feather and people who congregate to an area, especially it has the amenities that we have and the enhanced amenities that we're talking about strategically, that the word club has got to be a part of your thought process, because really, even though you're residents in an HOA, you're members of a club because of its incorporated nature. So I think somehow that, you know, your commonalities and your reasons for being here are shared by many in the community, and you guys are really, at the end of the day, members of the country club that you all live in, even if you don't utilize it the way people think that a country club is actually used. So that's my parting shot.
Mark,
Good point.
could I say one thing while we're on that subject? That is exactly the reason why when we send our bill to you, our payment, I wanted it to say Sterling Oaks Club and Community Association. And it got taken out, and I don't think it should ever be taken out of anything. I think it should be on letterheads. I think it should say Sterling Oaks Club and Community Association.
Paul?
Yeah, I think, again, that's particularly important because we are constantly wrestling with the tennis, the pool issue, and people paying for these amenities. And they're saying, why are we supporting this tennis program? Why don't we have access to it? Why does tennis get all this attention? Who's supporting the pool? I mean, we're amenity rich here in this community, and I think Mark makes a good point. We have to explain why that is.
Right.
And we have to explain, as we were incorporated, the intent of this community. So, and I think over the years, we've lost sight of that, and people are not quite sure why we stress certain things in this community, and why the board is so concerned with our amenities. So I think that's a good point, and we should reflect that in our mission statement and the vision statement.
Good. Chap, I'll let you finish us off today.
Yeah, Jerry, I want to depart from the strategic plan discussion when this wraps up. So if we're wrapped up, you can feel free to listen or leave, whatever you want.
Okay, well, we'll conclude this meeting. Thank you as always for your input, and I'll see everybody next Wednesday at 9. In the meantime, I'll send out some communication to you, the update of the plan, and some homework on the vision and mission. So that's it for me. Have a
Very
great
good. Nice job,
Right.
Jared.
So since
Good job,
this is,
Jerry.
since this is being broadcast or at least taped,
It's being taped. We're gonna send it back out here in just a bit. It's all recorded.
what I want to know is where do we stand on how and when we're going to open the fitness center?
We're working on trying to get the disinfectant products as we speak. And I think once we do that, we're going to move forward with that situation. You know, one of the things we just need to do is we have to have a way of people being able to know if they're going to come at 6 o'clock in the morning that they can get in and not wait in line, or if they can have to be there at 9 o'clock in the morning and wait in line. We just can't have people pile in and then half of the people that get there first, and then everybody else says go home and come back an hour later. We have to have some kind of system to be able to manage that operation.
So what that means is you want to go ahead with this